Hey, what's up, guys? The Political Junkie here. So this next story, I believe this happened last week. The Supreme Court started hearing stuff about DACA, and the reason I thought this was interesting and that I wanted to cover it was because DACA isn't as divisive as most people think. Um, People on both sides of the political aisle agree, like, yeah, we should protect the Dreamers because they're here of no fault of their own, and the only country they really know is the United States. And I haven't read through this article yet. It's from the New York Times, and they go through some polls and stuff like that, but I'm pretty sure it will reflect what I'm telling you. And if it doesn't, then hey, we'll discuss about it. So yeah, the name of the article is "The Supreme Court May Let Trump End DACA. Here's what the public thinks about it." So it says, polls show the program to protect young undocumented immigrants from deportation is broadly popular. Democratic organizers see an opportunity to mobilize voters if it is ended. So yeah, that's true, man. If the Republicans end the DACA program, that's going to be a huge motivation for a lot of voters to vote Democratic, I think, because it's such a divisive issue in that it's really important to a lot of people, but it's also undivisive in the way that people on both sides of the aisle agree that it should be a program that exists. So it increasingly looks like the Supreme Court's conservative majority will allow the Trump administration to end the Deferred Action for Childhood Arrivals program, or DACA, according to close observers of the court. Legal arguments aside, polls show that DACA, which has shielded from deportation roughly 700,000 undocumented immigrants who were brought to the United States as children, enjoys overwhelming popular support. Allowing it to end would put the court out of step with trends in national public opinion, which has recently become more sympathetic to immigration than at any point in recorded history. So yeah, this is a decision that will impact literally 700,000 people and stuff like that. But also, by the way, it came to my mind, Donald Trump was saying, like, a lot of people in the DACA program, they're not as innocent as they seem. Some of them are like criminals and stuff like that. You actually can't be in the DACA program if you have any criminal history, like even a DUI or anything like that. There's a couple people in the Trump administration, I believe, like that have DUIs, and I mean, I think both George Bush and Dick Cheney had DUIs. So I mean, it's not, don't drink and drive. Obviously, it's a horrible thing, but it seems like it's something forgivable. But I feel like Donald Trump is saying, like, oh, if you do anything, then you don't deserve to be here at all. Which I think is kind of crazy, because the way I really do look at a lot of these Dreamers, I mean, dude, they've lived here since they were kids. I mean, like, you wouldn't remember being born in your home country. So deporting them there makes absolutely no sense. They have no connections there. They didn't get educated there, anything like that. So yeah, and it's also interesting that it notes here that the Supreme Court is more sympathetic to immigration than any point in history. So that would point that it's like on the side of immigrants. But I guess some people, when they were hearing the arguments inside, they were like, I don't know, it looks like the conservatives might win this one out. Okay. But the voters who pay the closest attention to immigration tend to be Republicans, and they hold much more conservative views on the issue. Just before the 2018 midterm elections, a Pew survey found that Republican voters were 4 times as likely as Democratic voters to say illegal immigration was a very big problem. 75% of Republicans said it was, compared to 19% of Democrats. Okay. I just think that's a really interesting fact that they think it's that much of an important issue. I mean, I agree we should have like secure borders, and we should see who's coming into this country, but illegal immigration has decreased so much in like the past 20 years, and a majority of immigrants that come to this country commit crimes at a lower rate than native citizens, and so I don't know, it just kind of, and the recent things were like asylum seekers, right? They were like people like leaving and walking a bunch of miles to the United States and stuff like that. So, which is kind of funny too, because that was on the news all over the place, like the caravans and stuff like that. And I haven't heard anything about it now. So I think that was just bloated up just because of the 2018 midterm election. It was just to have an issue to talk about that was divisive, a wedge issue, if you will. It's something that will make you vote one way or the other, but it makes you not focus on all the other issues that that party supports. All right. A changing political picture. The public's view on immigration have gradually become more liberal overall in recent years, even as President Trump has made his opposition to immigration a central component of his political persona. In the past 2 years, 3/4 of Gallup respondents have said that immigration is generally a good thing. More than ever before recorded by a double-digit margin, Americans are more likely to say that immigrants help the economy rather than hurt it, Gallup found. I mean, I think that's true. Yeah, immigration is pretty good to this country. A lot of even undocumented workers, they work in like agriculture and then the fields and stuff like that, and they're the reason why you're able to eat all the stuff that you buy at the grocery store. I think this happened a while ago. This might have been like 2012 or 2013. I remember reading an article a long time ago that there was this one city in like Alabama or something. They tried getting rid of all the undocumented workers, and they did that, but then there was literally nobody that wanted to work in the fields. So they literally had to be like, all right, everybody come back, because nobody wants to work these jobs. I've worked in the fields only for a little bit. I worked like a week or two at the most, and in total, because I worked like a couple days or a week every year for a few years. And man, that's some hard work, man. I can't imagine doing that kind of work all year long. So yeah, DACA. So I'm continuing to read. DACA enjoys broader consensus than almost any other proposed immigration policy. A Market Law School poll found in September that 53% of voters nationwide would oppose a Supreme Court decision to strike down the program. So wow, if the Supreme Court decides to strike down the program, over half of Americans would oppose that. That's pretty crazy. So while 37% would favor it before the case reached the Supreme Court, 84% of Americans said in March 2018, from a political Harvard University poll, that they generally support DACA. And in another political Harvard poll from December of that year, 66% of respondents said that it was extremely important that Congress renew the program. So yeah, a lot of the controversies that Obama did the DACA program by executive order. And so there's discussion of whether that's even constitutional, that he could make that program through an executive order. So yeah, I would say a lot of pressure is on Congress to renew the program, because then you wouldn't have the constitutional debate about it, of what the executive powers of the president are. I think it's generally a good thing that we're seeing what kind of powers the president does have, tested out in the courts and stuff like that. But I do agree. I think it's extremely important that Congress renews the program, because then it'd be very difficult to overturn. So continue to read. I think you probably know when I'm actually speaking like this normal, and then when I'm reading off, because I feel like I have like a little bit of a different cadence when I'm reading. But anyways, I don't know, I just feel compelled to tell you. All of the 2020 Democratic presidential candidates have expressed support for DACA. Unsurprising. So people who are sympathetic to the Dreamers, undocumented immigrants who came to the United States as children, now make up a sizable chunk of the electorate in swing states like Arizona, Florida, Michigan, and Pennsylvania. And the Hispanic population is climbing especially quickly in some competitive southern states. It roughly doubled from 2000 to 2010 in North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia. So yeah, I mean, that kind of makes sense. A lot of especially those last three states, North Carolina, Virginia, and Georgia, I feel like they're increasingly getting more Democratic, especially Virginia. They just had an election not that long ago where the Democrats now have the governorship, the House, and the Senate within the state. And that's like the first time in like 20 years or something like that the Democrats have had power in all three branches of government. So yeah, it would make sense that in places where there's a high Hispanic population, more people being sympathetic with the Dreamers, because they realize like, oh, this is like my neighbor, this is my classmate, this is my coworker. This isn't just some random people that come to this country and they're criminals and stuff like that, like Donald Trump, I think, paints them to be. Most Americans seem comfortable with these developments. The share of the country that said immigration levels should be increased hit 30% earlier this year. the highest number since Gallup started asking the question in the 1960s. All told, more than 3 in 5 Americans now say that immigration levels should either rise or remain where they are. That's pretty interesting. Daniel Herrera, communications consultant at the left-leaning Rabin Group, said that if DACA ends, it could propel a youth mobilization campaign similar to the one that led to the program's passage in the first place. So this is in quotation marks. Where DACA does come into play is how well are Dreamers and Dreamer allies going to mobilize people who may not vote, he said. Is also in quotation marks. It's about your traditional get out the vote operations, where Dreamers are the public face of the campaign to get the youth vote out, he added. That's how you're going to mobilize youth voters, because theoretically they'll see themselves in those Dreamers and they'll be more motivated to vote. Yeah, I agree with that analysis. Like, people are, if it ends, I feel like, yeah, you're going to see a lot of mobilization from young people, a lot of mobilization from the Dreamers themselves. And because a lot of people are going to sympathize with them because they literally had no choice. I mean, yeah, you're throwing them out for something they didn't do. And that's why so many people, even on both sides of the aisle, are able to kind of feel for them. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how it plays out, because I think the official ruling won't be until like June of next year. So by then we'll know who the Democratic nominee is. So it'll be interesting to see how it plays out for the general election in 2020 if DACA is overturned. My guess, because Donald Trump has said that he was sympathetic to Dreamers in the past, he'll probably flip on it, because he'll realize that if it's ended, his chances of getting reelected probably go down a little bit. So he'll probably try to do some kind of compromise thing, where maybe they're like protected for a few more years, and maybe like a couple more years or something until there's another fix. And that's the kind of thing too. Obama even said when he implemented the program, it wasn't meant to be like a permanent solution. It was just a little temporary fix in the meantime, which I think kind of also led to this situation. I mean, Congress should pass something that not only protects the Dreamers, I think they should give them all a pathway to citizenship. And I think even giving their parents a pathway to citizenship, because most likely their parents have been here since they were at least kids, and I think it would be pretty messed up to if their parents were to get deported after, you know, they become citizens and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, I think there just needs to be like a whole nother like amnesty bill, kind of like how what Ronald Reagan did in the 80s, give a pathway to citizenship to all the undocumented immigrants that have been in this country without committing any crimes, and you know, they're just honest, hardworking people. So continuing to read from here. The partisan divide. But there is a deeper partisan rift on immigration than on almost any other issue. 82% of Democrats in a September Pew poll say it was important for the government to build a path to citizenship for immigrants who are currently in the country illegally, but just 48% of Republicans did. Now, it does make it out to seem like that's a pretty big difference, but I'm actually really surprised. 48% of Republicans agree that there should be a pathway to citizenship. So I actually think this issue does resonate with, because what other issues do Republicans agree with the Democrats on that is that large of a margin? 48%. I mean, dude, that's nearly half of the Republicans. The only other issues I could think of is there is a lot of polls that say like a majority of Republicans would support a universal healthcare system. I think I've even seen some that they support like free tuition college and raising the minimum wage. So those are some issues, but I feel like the article's making it like a higher divide than it is, because if you combine both of those numbers, that's a large chunk of the country. So while 58% of all Americans said in a CNN poll last month that they disapprove of Mr. Trump's handling of immigration, that number plunged to just 12% among Republicans. 86% of Republicans approved of how he has handled the issue. Immigration may be more of a motivating issue for the Republican base than the Democratic one. 46% of liberal Democrats ranked building a path to citizenship as very important, but a larger share of conservative Republicans, fully 6 in 10, say the opposite, that it is very important for the government to increase deportations to increase deportations of immigrants who have entered the United States illegally. When you just look at conservative Republicans, you can see that a hardline approach to immigration is broadly supported, and conservatives make up 2/3 of all Republicans, said Carol Doherty, analyst at Pew Research Center. That shows you how these issues have resonated with the Trump base. Still, Whit Ayers, a veteran Republican pollster, said that even many voters who support tough immigration policies often do not strongly favor ending DACA. The first step is to distinguish between attitudes about DACA and the attitudes about immigration overall. Consistently, Americans on the order of 80% have supported allowing the DACA kids to stay, he said. So yeah, even if Republicans don't agree with me, I would support like a pathway to citizenship for pretty much all the undocumented immigrants in this country. It seems like a lot of Republicans, more than you would think, do at least support DACA. And I think that's very important that we at least try to get that established. Because a lot of people say, oh, I want the two parties to work together. And I think it depends on what the issues are. If it's on bailing out Wall Street, hell no. If it's on, giving more tax cuts to the rich, hell no. If it's about giving corporate welfare, hell no. But if it's on an issue like this, where the two parties are coming together to do some good, I think a lot of people would be really happy about it. So there's just a couple more paragraphs. If the Supreme Court were to allow the Trump administration to end DACA, Mr. Ayers said the focus would shift to the legislative branch. He argued that this could provide an opportunity for Republicans to push through one of their immigration-related goals, such as increased border security in exchange for restoring DACA. What it does increase pressure on Congress to put DACA legalization together with border security and pass a limited immigration reform with just those two components that give something to both sides. Okay, so I guess that basically means like they're gonna want the wall funded in exchange for restoring DACA. I think the Democrats need to fight harder. That they'll be like, we'll give some border security funding in return for you giving a pathway to legalization for all undocumented immigrants in this country that have no violent crimes. So that's what I think. If you guys have a different opinion, leave a comment below. I'm very interested to see what people think on this issue. I hope you guys enjoyed listening to me and hearing this article about the DACA. And I'll be sure to cover what happens in June when the Supreme Court actually rules on what happens. Have a good day, guys.